The condo crisis hitting a Pembroke Pines complex.
The cracks, rotted wood, and crumbling balconies. Inside, many units are well maintained, and that's what's so heartbreaking.
Imagine, if you will, that you are a condo owner in Florida and you've been faithfully paying your mortgage and your condo fees for years. And one day you wake up and there's a sign outside your door that says your building is condemned and you have to evacuate. My name's Krista and I've been a realtor in the Central Florida area since 2009. And please don't forget to like and subscribe this video if you're finding value in it, as every little bit helps. Florida's condo crisis is unraveling faster than anybody could have predicted, and it's not just affecting rich retirees in South Florida living in oceanfront condo complexes. This is a disaster that's playing out across the state, and it's not because of any sort of a natural disaster. It's because of mismanagement of condo boards combined with the new sweeping legislation that is forcing them to have to update their older buildings and make sure they're safe.
And a lot of mismanagement with some of these associations over the years. People have talked about that that's really ruthless politics when you start getting into some of these condo associations. I mean, it's just that's developed over a long time.
Now, as many of you pointed out underneath past videos in the comments, this mismanagement isn't always accidental. Sometimes it seems that it is actually intentional. In some cases, these crises aren't exactly a surprise to everyone involved. Today, I want to show you the story of Heron Pond, which is a condo community in Pembroke Pines that's been forced to evacuate, and what this means for the thousands of people caught in the crossfire of this unfolding condo crisis.
The deadline is up. Residents of the Heron Pond condo complex in Pembroke Pines have until the end of the day to leave their homes. All 19 buildings in the community were deemed unsafe.
Buildings were found to be unsafe. On the outside, you can see cracks, rotted wood, and crumbling balconies. A full evacuation was ordered after a recent engineering report found widespread structural damage, a result of exposure to the elements, including moisture and termites.
Now look at this. Here's an owner who's been faithfully paying her mortgage for 18 years, who was basically taken by surprise with this.
Gloria Bettencourt, who's been paying her mortgage. Michael Padilla is helping her move.
It's killing her. She was crying earlier. She's going through a very emotional state right now. She's paying us to help her move, and I'm kind of saddened because I have to get paid because I'm a worker, but it's still wrong. She's been here 18 years.
Now, in this particular community, this is what many of you were pointing out in the comments. This building may have been allowed to deteriorate intentionally, with the goal for some of being able to acquire these units down the road at a cheap price. This may sound far-fetched, but many of you pointed out in the videos, in my past videos, that this may be what's happening. And it didn't take much digging to find this particular community. So owners are alleging that there was intentional neglect along with poor initial construction that has led to the current situation. In this community, owners are alleging that a secretive trust took over the board and intentionally mismanaged it. This community is facing serious issues, serious structural issues like roofing, water intrusion, electrical issues. But Heron Pond is just one of many communities that are undergoing this right now in Florida, and it makes me wonder if we're going to have a major shift away from condo ownership in Florida. Now, condos have always been a popular choice in Florida, especially for retirees and snowbirds.
Morty, what are you looking at?
I'll tell you what I'm looking at. The next condo board president of Del Boca Vista, Phase 3.
But with these massive and unpredictable expenses, many people are starting to shy away from condo ownership. Many people are considering, of course, newer buildings which don't have these concerns, or single-family homes where they have more control over maintenance themselves. Now, of course, not every building is mismanaged. And I remember a few years ago, I was selling a condo in New Smyrna Beach, and I met with the manager of the building, who is not only the manager, but he was an owner, and he, of course, resided in the building. And he explained to me very carefully that he had recently, within the past couple of years, had all of the balconies redone. And he explained to me in great detail that he had used, I think probably the special coated rebar to reinforce these balconies.
As I increase the load on the beam, you see cracks starting at only around 3 tons. These cracks form because steel stretches a little bit as it takes up tensile stress in the concrete. The beam is holding the load just fine and isn't even close to failure, but concrete can't stretch along with the steel, so it has to crack. You can imagine how these cracks could let water and air into contact with the reinforcement and eventually deteriorate the concrete.
And at the time, I remember not paying attention to it as much as I could have because this was all back before Surfside. But he was clearly very interested in making sure that, yes, it cost a little bit more money, but this repair was going to last for a long, long time. And surely there are other condo boards out there that do have this sort of an attitude rather than one of kicking the can further down the road and avoiding doing repairs. But it's these older buildings that are now under fire. So buyers who are still interested in purchasing a condo need to be much more cautious and more demanding in the documentation that they receive while they're under contract and doing their due diligence. It's not always easy to get these documents, even for owners, but it is going to be necessary to review them if you want to be careful. Now, I dug through the MLS for some time looking through older high-rise condo buildings because those are the ones that are supposed to have had the milestone report done. And let's just review who has to have this right now. The milestone inspection has to be done by an architect or an engineer when the building is 30 years old and every 10 years after that, or 25 years old and every 10 years after that, if the building is within 3 miles of a coastline. So looking through some of these older buildings, and the oldest building that I found was from 1962. Now in the MLS, there's a place where you can upload documentation. And you would think at this point that these older buildings would have had their milestone report done and those would be uploaded to the MLS. And that isn't always the case, but I was able to find a few milestone reports and I looked through them. So I picked through several of these milestone reports and I found they kind of all follow the same format where the architect or engineering company starts off discussing what this report is intended to do, and then their findings, and then sort of a future evaluation, or if there is need for a phase 2, they will mention that. So the shortest that I found was 7 pages long, and the longest was 23 pages. And the phase 1 milestone report, which is what most buildings have undergone so far, is a visual inspection. They are looking at structural components like balconies, foundations, load-bearing elements for any defects. And then in the report, they will document what they find. So they'll point out things like, there's a crack in the foundation, there's a crack in the parking garage, something like that. We found evidence of water intrusion on the balconies. We saw corrosion, we saw exposed rebar. And then after that, this milestone report will determine if there's a need for phase 2. And phase 2 is where they dig a little bit deeper. So phase 1 is just a visual. If the phase 1 report passes, then that gets passed on to the local authorities and recorded, and nothing else has to happen at this point. But if a phase 2 study is required, then they have to have the deeper test. So in terms of the overall effect on the Florida housing market, I don't see how this could fail to increase sales in single-family homes and harm sales in condos, especially older condos. And some of these may end up being completely redeveloped. As many of you also pointed out, there are certainly investors and funds waiting to scoop these up at lower prices, buy out the entire building and redevelop completely. And it seems like that's going to be an inevitable ending for some of these buildings. And with fewer people interested in older condos, the prices kind of have to decline due to decreased demand. And that could be a big shift in a state where condo living has been a staple for decades. So what do you think? Will the financial strain of these assessments push more people away from condos, or is this just a temporary phase? In the comments below, and thanks for watching.